Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Cultured Pull List. With the new Captain America movie just being released this weekend, we'll be talking about the comic debut of Sam Wilson as Captain America, as well as the character of Joaquin Torres, who is the Falcon in the new Marvel comic books. So, yeah, let's get into these stories here. This is going to be a couple Sam Wilson comic story arcs, so let's get into them. Welcome. Welcome, everybody. This is The Cultured Pull List, the official comic podcast of the Cultured Universe Podcast Network. If you're new to the show, every week, every episode, I pretty much just talk about a current comic story, usually relating to movies or TV shows coming out, and I compare the comic, well, talk about the comic, review it, and compare it to other adaptations, usually live action, but sometimes that's not applicable, so sometimes it's animated stuff or video games, TV shows, stuff like that. So, yeah, glad you're here. Hope you like this episode. Now, this episode is going to be a little different. I'm going to be covering a couple different comic series. There's going to be one mini series, the first ever Sam Wilson Captain America mini series, all new Captain America. It came out in 2014. It's only a 6 issue comic mini series. But then a little later, the next year, Captain America Sam Wilson, the series came out. It was 24 issues, but I'm only going to be covering the first volume of it. But the reason I'm covering these is it's, basically the first couple series of Sam Wilson Captain America, and that's a big deal right now because Captain America Brave New World just came out this weekend. Now, this movie has come with some pretty split and divisive reactions and reviews, but no matter what you think about the movie, if you've even seen it yet, this is, kind of an important movie because it's the next chapter of the MCU, but also it's the first Captain America movie without Steve Rogers in it, without starring Steve Rogers, and it's the first ever appearance of Sam Wilson as Captain America on the big screen. So, in honor of the movie coming out, we're going to be diving into Sam Wilson, how he differs in the comics compared to the movies and all that kind of stuff. First off, there kind of needs to be some background here because there is a lot of stuff that happened before these comics. So Steve Rogers, the original Captain America, obviously the Captain America for like forever, he fought this villain called the Iron Nail, who had like this technology given to him by an alien dragon of the same species as Fin Fang Foom, and somehow like this gave him the ability to sap Captain America's Steve Rogers super soldier serum out of him. And for some reason that's not quite explained, that like causes him to age rapidly. And so now he's, an old guy, and he still works with Shield and does some stuff in the field, but because of his age, he's mostly kind of more directing stuff from afar. But a few issues after issue 21, where Steve lost his super soldier serum, his powers, he chooses Sam to be the next Captain America, gives him the shield. Sam gets a new suit, and now he's the official Captain America. And Sam has been the Captain America ever since then, since 2012. Though Steve eventually did get Super Soldier Serum back, and he is also currently Captain America. They're kind of, you know, both holding the mantle at the same time. And another character that needs to be brought up is Ian Rogers. Now, Ian was created by the villain Arnim Zola, kind of as his progeny, but he made him. He's like organic, but made out of this weird substance called biomass, I guess. And he was left in Dimension Z, which is this dimension taken over by Arnim Zola. Captain America, Steve Rogers, is trapped there. Sharon Carter's trapped there at some point too. And long story short, Cap is left on Dimension Z for a long time. He adopts Ian, and Cap eventually escapes Dimension Z, but Ian is left behind with Sharon. They finally escape, but it's, the time in Dimension Z passes differently. So Ian's now an adult, and he takes on the mantle of the new Nomad. and he ends up being Sam's partner for a little while, and that is where the story picks up for All New Captain America. So let's get into that. Let's get into All New Captain America. This was written by Rick Remender with art by Stuart Immonen, inks by Wade Von Grawbadger. The colorists were Marte Gracia with Eduardo Navarro and Dono Sanchez Almara. The letterer is VC's Joe Caramagna. And this is a 6-issue miniseries published between November 2014 and April of 2015. So All New Captain America begins with a brief flashback to Sam's childhood in Harlem. Both his parents were murdered, and he had to take care of his 2 younger siblings. So in the present, Captain America, Sam, attacks a Hydra base to extract a kidnapped young man. And inside he meets Ian Rogers, Nomad, who's been undercover. They take out all the Hydra goons and they save the boy, but they're attacked by Batroc the Leaper. They're able to defeat him pretty quickly, but then more Hydra agents show up. So they escape in this elevator that turns out to have some crazy properties to it. It's called the Infinite Elevator, and it can like teleport them and I guess time travel and stuff. It's really weird. But so they escape. They try to go down the elevator, but it teleports them to this room where a bunch of villains are hanging out. And yeah, so Sam's able to escape with the kid, but Nomad is left behind to take on all the villains. And it turns out that they're in this place called Bagalia. That's where the that's where the elevator took them. And it's like this nation run by criminals, and it turns out that the kid is actually in on the whole Hydra thing. They were draining his blood in this machine for some purpose, but I guess he was a volunteer. So he tries to shoot Sam, he just grazes him, Sam crash lands, and then he's attacked by Crossbones, who followed him from that room they showed up in earlier. But then Misty Knight shows up in disguise, helps defeat Crossbones, and reveals that she's undercover, and she's uncovered that Hydra's infiltrated like a bunch of stuff, including S.H.I.E.L.D. So Sam can't even trust his contacts in S.H.I.E.L.D., including Steve, who's working for S.H.I.E.L.D. at the moment. Then we cut to Zemo, and he has captured Nomad. He pretty much explains his whole plan to Ian, explaining that the kid that they have his blood, he's an Inhuman, and his blood apparently has the ability to sterilize people. So what Hydra has done under the leadership of Zemo has weaponized his blood to sterilize the entire world except for Hydra, because they made an antidote that only Hydra has access to. And then after telling him all this, he slits Ian's throat and kills him. So then we go to Cap, who gets back in that elevator and tries to find Zemo and save Nomad. But it seems like he gets transported to the past, to World War II. But then Sin shows up, Red Skull's daughter, and captures him. And it's really not clear if this is like an illusion or he actually went back in time or it's an alternate universe. It's kind of confusing that they don't do a great job of explaining it. But Sin tries to defeat Sam by trying to break his spirit and discredit him. She starts to like spread some fake propaganda that Sam actually grew up as a criminal, similar to how her dad had tried to discredit tried to change Sam's past with the Cosmic Cube a long time ago. But Sam's able to defeat Sin, and he stops her from launching this explosive that's filled with the blood of that Inhuman kid. And I guess the whole Hydra plan, there's a bunch of different explosives. So next, Sam goes to India, where this villain named Armadillo is guarding one of the explosives, and Sam tries to get through to him, saying that he promises to like help him get help to cure his condition, which eventually does convince Armadillo. So he stops at that explosion. Meanwhile, Misty stops Madame Hydra from launching another bomb. Yeah, there's him convincing Armadillo. Then Sam is able to track down Zemo to his hideout in Florida, and there's a confrontation. But this time here in Florida, there's not an explosive. The Inhuman kid's actually gonna fly a plane that's gonna release a bunch of bugs and locusts that have, you know, that are infected with his blood or whatever, and it's going to infect a bunch of people that way. So Sam is unable to stop the plane from launching, and he launches all the bugs. And while he's distracted, Zemo attacks Sam and incapacitates him. We also see a brief flashback at this point where this Sam is in this coffee shop and there's this guy explaining how he's like mad that Sam is the new Captain America and saying he's like a diversity hire and stuff, and his son's trying to convince him that, you know, Sam earned the role, that he's been Cap's partner for decades, but the guy just doesn't want to hear it and says, look, Sam Wilson isn't my Captain America. So then back to the present, Sam's still fighting Zemo, but he's able to use his telepathic link to birds to bring a whole swarm of them, which attacks Zemo and also attacks the plane the Inhuman kid's piloting, and they also eat all of the birds infected with his blood, so he saves everybody in America from being sterilized. And then Nomad shows up and starts beating the crap out of Zemo, and it turns out that I guess he has like healing ability that he, due to the way his dad, quote unquote dad, Arnim Zola, made him, and if he has like this biomass fluid in his suit, he can heal himself. That's how they explain it, basically. So while Nomad's taking on Zemo, Sam flies over to the plane and gets the kid out of it and crashes it. Nomad is able to beat Zemo while Misty makes a deal with Taskmaster to not launch his bomb in Russia. Then Sam comes back, Nomad explains, you know, what happened and everything, and he also explains to Sam that when going through their computer earlier after he resurrected, he saw that there's another bomb. It was not even a bomb, it's a vampire named Baron Blood who has sucked sucked the blood out of the Inhuman kid, so now he's filled with his blood, and he's going to go out into the atmosphere and explode himself with a bomb he tied to himself, and that's going to like rain down on the earth and cause all the sterilization and everything. So Nomad and Sam start to go to, I believe it's like Germany or something, where the vampire is, but then Batroc shows up again. Nomad stays to fight him while Sam gets in the elevator and goes after Baron Blood with Red Wing. Red Wing gets to him first, but Baron Blood like bites Red Wing and turns him into a vampire bird, which is interesting. Sam then beats the ever-loving crap out of Baron Blood, that's DC, Baron Blood, and Baron Blood like spits blood into Sam's face, which infects him, and then Sam is able to overpower Baron Blood and detach the bomb from him, and then just kind of leave him floating out in space. Meanwhile, Nomad was able to defeat Batroc and defeat Zemo, who woke up and tried to attack him, and Zemo started the self-destruct sequence of the base, and it blows up, seemingly killing both Zemo and Nomad. But if you know anything about comics, they're probably going to come back. Meanwhile, Sam plummeted back to Earth from the atmosphere, falls into the ocean, but Misty saves him, and she reveals that not only did she capture the Inhuman kid, but she also was able to get a dose of the antidote, which she gives to Sam, so Sam isn't infertile, sterile, and they part with a kiss, and Sam and Red Wing go off and do their Captain America stuff. Alright, so now that we're done with that first series, let's go on to the next one, which in a lot of ways seems to be more influential because it introduces the new Falcon, Joaquin Torres. Also, this is written by Nick Spencer, who wrote a bunch of Captain America comics before this, and then writes this, and he's currently writing the Captain America run that's going on right now, I believe. So he's a Captain America veteran. So yeah, let's get into Captain America Sam Wilson, Volume 1, written by Nick Spencer, with art by Daniel Acuna, Mike Choi, Paul Renaud, and Joe Bennett. The inks were by Daniel Acuna, Mike Choi, Paul Renaud, and Bellardino Bravo. And the colorists were Daniel Acuna, Mike Choi, and Romulo Fajardo Jr. And the letterer was once again VC Joe Caramagna. And this is another 6-issue volume book, whatever, but it's the first 6 issues of the 24-issue series. And these were published between October 2015 and February of 2016. So the story starts with Sam getting on this commercial plane, going back home, and a lot of this story is revealed in flashbacks, and he's telling these guys on the plane that recognize him, that are fans, about what happened. Like, he explains that a little earlier he attacked another Hydra base to save this SHIELD scientist who had been duped into working for them, and we see that he's working with Misty and Demolition Man, who is this like lesser known hero who has a lot of issues, a lot of problems, but he's kind of reformed, and Sam's given him a second chance to be on his team. So they save the Shield scientist Sam takes him back to Shield, and it's made clear that he and Maria are not on good terms, and he is not working for Shield anymore, working with Shield anymore. So she tells him to get out, basically, and we see through his monologues that Sam kind of took a stand on some political issues that were important to him, and he felt like were just, it was the right thing to do to speak out about these things, and he tried to preach a message of unity, but it still pissed off a lot of people who didn't agree with what he said, and now he's like, got a lot of controversy on his name, and even the stewardess on the plane said she didn't like him, but he still had some fans on there who were wanting to talk to him. But to help people, Sam decided to set up this hotline for people to call in and ask for his help, since he's not working with Shield and doesn't have Shield's resources, and we'll learn about that later. And this one lady, her name is Mariana Torres, and she explains that her grandson Joaquin has gone missing. He's been labeled a coyote because he leaves. He and his grandmother immigrated to America a while ago, and Joaquin leaves water and food out for immigrants crossing the desert so that they don't die out there. But he's been labeled a coyote because of it. But now, she thinks that her grandson Joaquin has been taken by the Sons of the Serpent, which are like this anti-immigrant militia group, basically, that are like an offshoot of the Serpent Society. So Sam decides to go help find Joaquin and take on the Sons of the Serpent, but they don't have any money anymore because there's no assets from Shield. So Sam goes to his brother, who's able to give him some money for the mission, but they still have to fly commercials. So that's why that's happening. So out in the desert, this group of migrants are attacked by the Sons of the Serpent, and they're going to be murdered by them until Sam shows up and beats the crap out of them. But then Steve and Shield show up and tell Sam to stand down, and we see even more backstory why he's on bad terms with Shield. This hacktivist called the Whisperer released this plan by Shield and Maria Hill, who's in charge of Shield, that they were going to use fragments, or they were keeping fragments of the Cosmic Cube so that they could pretty much just rewrite reality when they felt like it. Sam was super against this and spoke up against it, and so did Steve. He and Steve were on the same side about this. Then we cut back to the present, and Steve explains to Sam that Shield has been tracking the Sons of the Serpent for a while, and Sam just kind of got in the middle of it and ruined their whole operation. So Sam's like, oh well, doesn't really care. So he uses his telepathic link to birds to track the head honcho. I forget what he's called, but the head honcho of I think King Snake or something, and he tracks him down to this fast food place, and it turns out he and the coyote that were leading the immigrants across the desert were actually in cahoots, and apparently they're working for somebody else to capture some of these immigrants, and they had kidnapped Joaquin, and we're not really sure yet what they're doing with them, but Sam captures both of them. And then our Armadillo shows up, who we just saw in All New Captain America, and it turns out that Sam did everything in his power to help him, but none of his friends like Reed, Tony, nobody were able to cure Armadillo's condition, so he thinks that Sam lied to him, so now he's mad at Sam. But Sam is able to defeat our Armadillo this time, and he gets some info from the Whisperer, who Sam is now in contact with and kind of working with, that all of these immigrants that have been kidnapped are taken to the lab of this guy called Carl Malice. So then we see another flashback to Maria Hill doing everything in her power to take down this Whisperer guy, but Sam's kind of on Whisperer's side and is like, he blew the whistle on you guys, and he doesn't think that Maria should be using her power to go on this personal vendetta. So when Shield goes off to and Steve kind of tries to convince Sam to not get involved, but Sam doesn't listen, and when Shield tries to arrest Whisperer, Sam goes off and saves him from Shield. And in the present, Sam goes off and he locates Carl Malice's lab. The next issue, Misty infiltrates Malice's lab, and it seems that Sam had been captured and turned into a man-wolf thing, like Cap-Wolf back in the day in the comics. That was Steve. And we see a flashback to Sam arriving at the lab, but it turns out Malice has done some weird, messed up experiments with symbiotes and turned himself into this weird hybrid, and he overpowers Sam and turns him into the wolf, and then leaves him in the lab and goes to a different location. So Sam is able to use his connection to Red Wing, because Malice still has Red Wing, to track him to this new lab. He fights a bunch of these hybrid animal creatures, and he uses this sonic cannon that Red Wing has to take out Malice and his symbiote, and he rescues Joaquin, who has been genetically bonded by Malice to Red Wing. So now Joaquin's like this vampire bird man. Well, he's not a vampire, but he has some of Red Wing's vampire characteristics, such as regeneration. And yeah, so Cap is still a wolf, but it's made clear that his condition is temporary, whereas Joaquin seems permanent because the regeneration makes it so that the temporary effects don't go away, I guess. Whisperer contacts Sam again, and he found out some information that the organization that was pulling Malice's strings is actually the Serpent Society, but they've changed their whole approach, and now they're calling themselves Serpent Solutions, and their whole plan is they're basically kind of a consultant group for all of the major industries like cosmetics, even the military industrial complex, fashion, pretty much everything that, makes up the world economy. They're kind of offering their services, but also kind of taking over and doing all the messed up stuff that they, the corporations don't want to be involved with, but also they're pushing their genetic alterations for all of these different corporations. And yeah, and they're basically stomping out anybody who tries to object. So to get to Serpent Solutions, Cap tracks down somebody who used to be part of the Serpent Society. Her name is Rachel, aka Diamondback. She's reformed, and she actually used to have she had a fling with Steve back in the day, but she's now working as an exotic dancer to pay the bills. But while they're talking, and while Sam tries to enlist her help, Serpent Solutions shows up and attacks them, and it's revealed that Diamondback was actually in cahoots with them the whole time, and she helps to capture Sam. And we see that Viper, who is now the lead guy of Serpent Solutions, and he has a background in advertising, and that's kind of what's been feeding into his whole spiel with all of the corporations and everything. And he tracks down Diamondback and convinces her to join them because, I guess her husband or boyfriend got sick and died, and she's been just kind of limping along since then. So back in the present, Cap is captured. He's in this boardroom with all the Serpent Society members. Meanwhile, Misty's trying to fight her way to rescue him, and Cap is paralyzed by this toxin of one of the Serpent Society members, and then Viper throws him out the window of this high-rise, of this skyscraper. Joaquin, who was in this hospital bed recovering from, the experiments, is able to know what's going on with Sam because of Sam's psychic link with Red Wing, and Red Wing now also has a link with Joaquin. So he knows Cap's in trouble, so he flies out of the hospital room and saves Cap just as he's about to hit the ground. But Cap is still paralyzed, so Joaquin has to take on all these Serpent Society members himself who are attacking him. And he almost dies, but then he's able to regenerate. And Misty shows up and helps, and so does Demolition Man. And Rachel even has a change of heart, Diamondback, and helps them as well. So they're able to defeat all the Serpent Solution members. Then Cap tracks down all of the corporate heads that were working with Serpent Solutions, and he plans on arresting them all. But the head guy explains that, if you arrest us all, the economy's going to plummet, a bunch of people are going to lose their jobs, yada yada. So, and there is this kind of funny moment where the guy's trying to convince Cap that he got where he was because of all his hard work, and that he pays all the taxes, the majority of the taxes in the country. And one of his lackeys is kind of saying well, we did get millions and millions of dollars of inheritance from our dads, and we do own 90% of the wealth in the country as well. It's just a kind of funny scene. But then Cap kind of realizes that he can't arrest all of them and just destroy the whole economy. So he just takes the head honcho and says like, you all need to keep your employees and treat them well, and I will eventually come back for you. It's just a matter of time. But he kind of has to compromise there, and so the story ends, and all the wolf DNA or whatever that happened to him has dissipated. Sam is back to his normal self. But Joaquin is still a bird guy, and he now takes on the mantle of Falcon and has his own suit, and that's how this story wraps up. All right, so let's talk about these books. Now, these are the first, I mentioned earlier, these are the two first comic series that Sam Wilson was Captain America, though he was named Captain America, in the old Captain America series. But yeah, so the first one I thought was really cool. I think what really stood out to me in the all new Captain America was the art. The art was very cool. The colors really popped. I really liked that. I like the. I don't think it was invented or created for this series, but I do really like Sam Wilson's Captain America suit. That's very cool. I do like. I kind of wish there was maybe a little more of a. Maybe it showed this in other series. I kind of wish there was more. Showed more of Sam kind of adjusting to the role of Captain America, maybe struggling a little more. There was like hints here and there, and there's that one scene of him in the coffee shop where that guy was saying like, "Oh, he's not my Captain America." I thought that was a really good scene. It was a little bit like on the nose, like lore dump, like, but it was kind of representative of you know everybody's, not everybody, but a lot of people's thoughts of Captain America, especially Sam, especially him being black, yada yada. And I think is very realistic if you just look at the discourse of Sam being Captain America in the movies now. Like, he's been Captain America in the comics for the past 13 years almost, and there's still people online who are like, "Oh, you shouldn't be Captain America, yada." So I think this felt really realistic, if maybe a little on the nose, but still. And having Sam actually there to hear it was interesting. I kind of wish they had explored that a little more instead of just being like a brief flashback. But I thought the story was really was pretty fun. The whole Inhumans making people sterile was like kind of like wild. It's kind of an interesting take on things. Hydra wanting to sterilize everybody, and instead of just murdering everybody, they just wait for them to die out while they can keep like repopulating the earth. That was kind of a wild plan, but kind of an interesting take. I liked that Zemo was behind everything. He just one of my favorite Cap villains. I thought that was cool. I thought that it was interesting how many villains were in this. I liked that they just kind of threw Sam into that, and he has to battle all of Steve's old enemies. Well, I mean, kind of his enemies too, but now that he's Captain America, he's almost like inherited Steve's villains. Thought that was cool. I liked that he and Misty teamed up. I felt like Ian's inclusion for me felt a little out of nowhere. I'm sure maybe if I had been following the previous Captain America series, it would have felt more natural. But he's still an okay character. I think the way that he was able to just like die and come back was maybe a little convenient, but maybe I think it seems like they hinted more that that kind of happened in the past, or something that happened in the past made that happen. So, all right, fair enough. I think that the ending with the vampire guy bearing blood, that felt a little bit tacked on. I felt like it could have ended with Zemo being defeated, but it's kind of nitpicky. I think overall I did like this. Another thing that I kind of wish had been different, I felt like I think like the infinite elevator, that was kind of vague. They didn't really explain what it was. They just sort of kept using the elevator, and it seemed to be able to teleport, but also maybe go back in time. That one issue where Sam fights Sin, it's not really clear whether that was really World War II or not. I don't think I missed anything. Maybe I did, but I wish that had either been explained better or just not been included. But speaking of Sin, I thought that one part was really cool. They explored how Red Skull, her Sin's father, had used the cosmic cube to basically reduce Sam, or try to rewrite reality to reduce Sam to just like a thug, basically getting rid of his whole origin where he was really influential in his community in Harlem, and how his parents were great people. He just like tried to get rid of that and try to reduce him, which is feels like a very Nazi thing to do. And I think that that was interesting how Sin brought that back and tried to almost kind of convince Sam that, oh, this was actually real, the whole fake thug identity. past that criminal past that Red Skull made up for him. And I think it was interesting seeing Sam kind of struggle with that, but it kind of happened really quickly. I might have wanted to explore that a little bit more, but it kind of took a backseat to the rest of the plot. But that being said, yeah, I did like this. I thought it was pretty cool, pretty decent debut series for Sam Wilson's Captain America. So I think I give it a 6.5, 6.5. Now, moving on to Captain America Sam Wilson. This one was honestly, I think overall, I think I liked this one more. This seemed to have a better pace and seemed to, at least the first three issues, seemed to delve more into Sam as a character. And I think it really rung true, the whole thing where he kind of took a stance politically and he tried to be unifying, but instead he ended up just pissing off like half the people in America who have a different political ideology. And I did like that they differentiated Sam from Steve. How Steve didn't really get into politics unless he had to, whereas Sam felt the need in this such a divisive political atmosphere, as well as just a lot of injustices and still lots of racial inequality. He really felt like he needed to stand up and say something. And as Captain America, he kind of he felt like he had a duty to stand up for what was right. And, of course, that, whenever that happens, sometimes you can be too partisan, but sometimes it's just like, no matter what you say, people are going to get mad and disagree with you. So I felt like that was very realistic. And I did like the fact that he went up against like that hate group, the Sons of the Serpent, and it was interesting how they were just kind of an arm of the Serpent Society. So it was kind of cool bringing the Serpent Society back. I'm not super familiar with them, like I know who they are, but seeing them as like a rebranded, like trying to like get into corporate consulting was kind of funny. And yeah, I think this book did also have a lot to say about corporate greed and justifying doing awful things for either using like whataboutism or other things. I think they did a decent, I think Nick Spencer did a decent job with that. I did like that, and it was very much satire, which I thought was fun too. I think you could say some of it was a little on the nose, which I somewhat agree. What I really and I really like Daniel Acuna's art. The rest of the art in the book was good, but Daniel Acuna's like really stood out to me. He also did Avengers Twilight, and he has a very distinct style, and it really has a gravitas to it that I really love. But a couple things I didn't love. I didn't love that Sam was like Cap Wolf for so much. Basically, the entire tail end of this volume, he was of this swath of issues. He was, Cap Wolf, and they were saying it was going to go away after a while. But by the end of the book, it took pretty much like 2 or 3 issues for him to, you know, get back to being normal. And I felt like it felt like it was just sort of like a little wink and a nod to Steve Rogers being a werewolf back in some old comics. So I feel like that didn't necessarily, it might have been alright for one issue, but I didn't really love that he was basically a wolf man for 3 whole issues, especially in the climax. I felt like it took away from Sam being Captain America. He was still Captain America, but he wasn't, he was like Cap Wolf. I think it might have, for me, it would have been better if he was, just himself, Sam Wilson, his human self. The introduction of Joaquin, interesting. I had never read this before. I wasn't really that familiar with Joaquin Torres. I was honestly, kind of my first introduction to him was honestly in the MCU. So seeing him in this, where he's basically like a bird guy, was interesting. We'll talk a little bit more later about the differences between the MCU versions of these characters. But yeah, I don't know how I feel. Like, I have mixed feelings about him just being like the new Falcon, being like a bird guy. On the one hand, I feel like it makes him feel more unique and not just be a retread of like, oh, he's just a guy with, a bird suit like Falcon, like Sam. But on the other hand, it's kind of weird that he's like genetically bonded with Red Wing. Oh, that was another thing. I thought it was a little weird that they made Red Wing a vampire. Like, he got bit by Baron Blood, and now he's like a vampire bird. I mean, that's okay, but kind of weird to me, and the fact that like now Joaquin is like part Red Wing. I guess it's cool because it bonds him to Red Wing as the new Falcon, but I don't know. It feels a little bit too zany to me, but that's just my opinion. I don't think it's like oh the bad decision objectively, you know. But I mean, you know, so I'm kind of two minds about Joaquin being a bird guy. You know, like an actual like he actually has bird DNA in him. But yeah, anyway, I'm done blabbing about that. The second book, I think the first half was a lot stronger. I really enjoyed it though. I think purely for the first half, I don't know. I think, like I said, I think it started to fall apart a little bit towards the end. It started to be a little less interesting to me. But I think overall, I'd give Captain America Sam Wilson Volume 1 I think a 7 out of 5. So it was good, not great, but I kind of it made me want to read the rest of the series, which I'll probably do on my own time. But yeah, let's talk a bit about the differences between the comic version of these characters and the MCU version. So, first of all, of course, let's start with Sam Wilson, originally the Falcon, Captain America's partner for decades. They really changed his origin in the MCU, and I kind of prefer the MCU version if I'm being honest. In the original comics, Sam was born and raised in Harlem, and both his parents were murdered. And his father was a pastor, and then he went on to live. After his parents were murdered, Sam he took care of his siblings for a while. When he grew up, he went to live on this island called Exile, and then he ran into Red Skull, and Red Skull used the cosmic cube to give him the power to communicate with Red Wing specifically, but also other birds. And then he became Captain America's sidekick and partner after this. And I think also the dynamic between Captain America and Sam is different in the comics versus the movies. But I'll get into that in a second. In the MCU, Sam's origin is very different. He was born and raised in Louisiana, which we see in the Falcon and the Winter Soldier series, and he's an Air Force veteran, and he's also a counselor for veterans. And honestly, I kind of like this more. I think in the comics, so many characters are from New York, and I think having Sam be from Louisiana just kind of diversifies things a little bit, makes it a little more interesting, gives him a more unique backstory, I think. And I think having him be in the Air Force not only makes more sense for him than being a superhero because he's got, you know, the military training, but I also think it makes Captain America, Steve, and Sam bond more. And I really like that he's a counselor for vets in the MCU when we first meet him in the Winter Soldier. I really like that. I think that really just plays into his character. And I think what really separates Sam and Steve in the MCU at least is Sam really uses those counseling skills to talk people down, try to convince people. You know, he'll fight when he has to, but he prefers to resolve things with his words. Steve, well, he's not a hothead. He's very much like just really good at going in there, beating the crap out of the bad guy, which makes sense because he was fighting Nazis for most of his life. But he is really great at making rousing speeches. But I think Sam's strength is really just talking to people on a personal level, one on one, being convincing, appealing to their empathy and their struggles, things like that. And I think that's a really cool aspect to the MCU and really what makes Sam unique as a character. Now, the dynamic between Steve and Sam in the comics at first was a lot more sidekick and hero kind of thing, which I think is just a product of the time. In the comics, there was kind of an obsession with like the hero has to have a sidekick kind of thing. As the relationship evolved, it became more like partners. But I do like in the MCU that they just start out as being friends and then kind of partners. And I do really kind of like the trio of Bucky, Sam, and Cap. I kind of wish we got to explore that more. But I think a really a strength of the MCU version of Sam is his relationship with Bucky after Steve, gets old. You aren't really sure if he dies or not. But in The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, they really do have a great dynamic. They play off each other well, and their friendship really evolves. I think that's really cool. I don't think we really get to see that so much in the comics. Now, I do want to talk about Sam's suit. I've never really loved Sam's suit in the MCU until the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Before, obviously, in the Winter Soldier, he just kind of had a basic, like, army looking jetpack thing with a little bit of, like, barely any armor on it. And then it changes, obviously, and he has. I'm still really not sure why they chose this color scheme. The armor itself looks decent, looks kind of cool, but I don't know. I think they were trying to make him, seem more like Captain America's partner or sidekick or whatever. So he had to have more of like a dark blue and red. I really wish they had just given him the look from the comics from the get go, the white and red with a little bit of yellow or gold. We finally get that in the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, but he only gets that suit for the first 5 episodes of the series, and then that's it. I wish that had been his costume for pretty much the entirety that he's been in the MCU. He's been in a lot of movies now, like all the events. He pretty much had this suit, the red and blue suit, from the end credits scene of Age of Ultron through Avengers Endgame, and it only just changed in the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. So yeah, not the biggest fan. Oops, skipped around there. But I do like that. And now that he's got the Captain America suit, that looks awesome. The one he has at the end of Captain America and the Winter Soldier looks so much like the comics. I love it. And he has it in the end of, or not the end, in the beginning of the new movie. Though they do get rid of like that cowl piece, which I do like because it looks just like the comics, but apparently it was really impractical to use on set and it was really uncomfortable for Anthony Mackie, so they just went back to the goggles, which, fair enough. He still looks great, but now he's got the new suit in the new Captain America movie, which still looks cool. I didn't like it at first because I really loved the suit at the more like white themed suit at the end of the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, but it has grown on me, the new suit. Yeah, let's talk about some other characters, compare them to the. Oh, no, actually, before that, I do want to talk about how Sam picked up the mantle of Captain America. In the comics, it's very similar to how it happened in the MCU, honestly. In the comics, I mentioned earlier that Steve Rogers got old, and, after he loses the super soldier serum, and he handpicks Sam to be Captain America, and he gives Cap the shield and everything. And I don't know if everybody knows this, but even though Bucky was Captain America after Steve died in the comics, Bucky was never handpicked by Steve Rogers to be Captain America. And he never even like said in his final moments, or in which he did leave a note saying that he wanted the mantle to keep going, but it was actually Tony Stark who picked Bucky to be the next Captain America. So even though Bucky was Captain America before Sam in the comics, and even then he was Captain America very briefly. Steve came back, after a couple years and took back the mantle. Sam has been in. I'm pretty sure Sam has technically been Captain America in the comics longer than Bucky ever was, and he was handpicked by Steve. So that's why I never really had an issue with Sam being Steve's choice in the MCU, because I mean it's technically what happened in the comics, even though Bucky did have a brief stint as Cap. But I don't know, a lot of people seem to just have the memory, because I guess because of Ed Brubaker and his run of the death of Captain America is so iconic. I think people really wanted to see that on the big screen. So I mean that's understandable, but I feel like narratively I think it makes more sense for Sam to be Captain America, and we see that in the end of Endgame. Though Steve has aged for a different reason, he's just old now because he went back in time. He still does handpick Steve and hands him the shield and everything. So yeah, I think in both the comics and in the movies, Sam is always the choice of Steve to take on the mantle of Captain America. Now let's move on to some other characters. Let's talk about Joaquin. So the biggest differences between Joaquin in the comics and the MCU. In the comics, he's not in the Air Force like he is in the MCU. Again, they kind of seem to do this where the new partner, has to be in the Air Force, or at least in the military in some respects. But I think it makes sense in the MCU for Joaquin to be in the Air Force, because like how else is Sam gonna meet him organically? They could have done the storyline where he the whole finding him captured by the Sons of the Serpent, but that's kind of a big story arc. I think it's a little more streamlined in the MCU, so I understand why they did it. I feel like it's maybe a little more interesting in the comics, but I do really like Joaquin so far in the MCU. And I don't know, I kind of have mixed feelings about him being like, a Birdman type thing. I feel like while it is comic accurate, I can totally see why they went the more grounded route in the MCU where he's just kind of got he rebuilds Falcon's suit, Sam's suit to be the new Falcon. I think that fits the tone of the Captain America movies a lot more, and it feels more like an MCU thing. And to be honest, the whole like Birdman thing, like I mentioned earlier, it kind of separates Joaquin, makes him more unique, but it's also a little bit zany. I mean, as far as comics go, it's not like, oh wow, that's too far. But as far as like Captain America comics and like Captain America is either always a super soldier or with Sam, a soldier, so or not a soldier, but a more grounded human, I guess. So having like a bird guy as an ex Falcon, I mean, it's no big deal, but I don't know if it would translate well into live action, but who knows. Yeah, I mean, we haven't really seen much of Joaquin so far. We've seen him in a little bit in The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and then he's, kind of a supporting character in the new movie. But yeah, I'm curious to see what they do with him going forward. Maybe they'll do some storyline where he becomes a bird guy. He's genetically altered. I don't know. But yeah, that's pretty much everything to talk about with Joaquin. Okay, so last couple things to discuss about comics versus the MCU. Now, these guys don't really tie into these specific comics that I covered this episode, but they are in Captain America Brave New World, and they obviously are comic characters. They have a long history in the comics. There is some major spoilers here for Captain America Brave New World, so if you want to skip, there's chapters here, or time codes if you're listening to this, the audio version. But yeah, so let's talk about the leader. So in the comics, the leader, he's a Hulk villain, and he's Dr. Samuel Stearns. He's got this big head, and he's got powers like telekinesis and telepathy and genius level intellect, all that stuff. So it seemed like originally Marvel was planning on giving Samuel Stearns. Oh yeah, Samuel Stearns, the character was in the Incredible Hulk 2008 movie, and they kind of teased he was going to be the leader, but that never happened for like 17 years. They finally decided to, fulfill that plot thread in this movie and make him the main villain. And originally, I guess they were planning on giving him a more comic accurate look, with the facial hair and the just like the big bulbous head. And I guess this got released through some promo art, but I guess they decided to change it through a bunch of like reshoots and whatnot. That I guess there are a lot of reshoots throughout this movie that a lot of people have been reporting on. But they didn't. I guess they changed his look to this, which I guess they were going for like a, like a brain coming out of his skull, like tumor thing. But it looks really grotesque. And like on the one hand, like I kind of like the body horror element of it. On the other hand, it's like that doesn't look like the leader. I kind of wish if they were going for more like, I guess they changed it because they wanted to make it more grounded, but again, that's not that grounded. But I guess maybe they were thinking the big bulbous head would be too cheesy. I feel like they could have just gone for kind of gone like a middle route, which is in the comics anyway, and it's given him like the classic bulbous head, but making it just kind of like grotesque looking. Like there are a few different times in the comics he's looked like that. But yeah, not a huge fan of the leader look in the movie, and I don't think many other people were either. They also changed it where he doesn't really have any powers besides a genius level intellect. So he's basically just like, just being able to figure everything out and pull strings the whole movie, but he doesn't have, mind control, telepathy, telekinesis, anything like that. So yeah, kind of a bummer. They definitely kind of fumbled the leader. So it's kind of a bummer too, especially considering, at least I've been waiting to see the leader on screen ever since, the Hulk. And it's kind of disappointing. Maybe they'll do something better with him later down the line, but we've already waited almost 20 years for this character. So yeah, that's kind of a bummer. Now, the next character I want to talk about is Red Hulk. They actually did I think that they did a really good job in the movie with Red Hulk. There are some differences because in the comics he's like engulfed in flames a lot because the angrier he gets, the hotter he gets. They kind of teased at one point in the movie that he's hot and radiating heat. but they never really mention it or explain it, or it doesn't really come up in the fight. He just kind of like, it just burns Ross's suit off. So in the comics, Ross got his powers from AIM, I think, and he wanted to become the Red Hulk. Like, he wanted the powers, whereas in the movie, Stearns kind of poisons Ross with gamma and does this to him. It's not under his control. In that respect, I think it works for the story, and I think it really works for Stearns getting revenge on Ross, because like that's kind of like the ultimate revenge, turning Ross into a Hulk, which, he's spent most of his life, or at least a good portion of his career in his life, hunting down Hulk. So it's kind of a big middle finger to Ross. So I do kind of like that change, at least in the context of this story in the MCU. But yeah, that is everything I wanted to cover in this episode. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Before I sign off, before I end this episode, I did want to mention a couple cultured picks. Haven't done that in the last few episodes, but I am a bit behind on my comic reading, but I'm finally catching up on some stuff that I wanted to read. So a couple recommendations I have is Iron Man #1. This is a new series by Spencer Ackerman, and it just came out a few months ago, at least his first issue. I think there are a few issues in now, but it's very interesting. It's kind of stripping Iron Man down to his basics, because he loses his company, he loses control of his armor. Not to give away too much, but and he has to fight Roxxon, who's taking over his company, and he has to kind of go back to his roots, but also kind of make like this analog, almost like steampunk suit, which I think is really cool. I really like the design of it. It looks kind of like a mix of steampunk and modern day, and it looks really badass to me. So yeah, that was a really cool book, and I really look forward to the rest of the series. So check that out if you're an Iron Man fan. The next thing I want to talk about is West Coast Avengers #1. I was very interested in this when I first saw it, mainly because Ultron is part of the team, and Tony uses the Silver Centurion armor, and this actually directly ties into Iron Man #1. Tony uses his old Silver Centurion suit that he has like in a storage room somewhere, because he can't use his other suits, and I guess he hasn't finished his other suit yet at this point when this story takes place. So he uses the Silver Centurion armor, which is like my favorite armor from the comics. I just think it looks really cool. I like the silver and red, the way they just go together, just really pops. And I think it's kind of simplistic while also having a really eye-catching design. I just really like that suit. But the whole point of this story is that Rhodey is trying to develop a team of new like Avengers by rehabilitating past criminals, and so far they haven't had much luck. But the big linchpin here is Ultron, and we're not really sure yet why he's reformed. But there is like some other subplot where it seems like Ultron, or at least another version of Ultron, is doing some stuff behind the scenes. But yeah, I thought that was a really cool start to that book as well. I look forward to reading the rest of the series. But yeah, those are my cultured picks for this week, and that is the episode, everyone. Hope you enjoyed it. If you want to check out these books yourself, I mean, there's always Marvel Unlimited, but I'll also leave a link to the graphic novels below, the trade paperbacks. And be sure to like and subscribe. And if you're listening to this on Spotify, Apple, or whatever other podcast platform, be sure to leave a 5-star review. And if you would like to check us out on Patreon, you can go to patreon.com/theculturednerd. If you want to support the Cultured Pull List specifically, just look for our show specific tier. Once again, thank you so much for joining us, and be sure to like, subscribe. If you want to check out the Cultured Nerd and the Cultured Pull List on social media, you can scan the QR code on the bottom left. If you want to check out Casual Experts, which is my other brand where I just talk about horror movies, comic movies, all the kind of nerdy stuff, you can Star Wars. I have my own social media and podcast. Check out Casual Experts by scanning the QR code on the bottom right. Until next time, everyone, be good to yourselves, be good to each other, and read some comics.